Hey everybody, thanks for joining me for this quick little watercolor tutorial today. I wanted to show you how I made this watercolor cup of hot chocolate. So I'm going to do my best to walk you step by step through the process, including how to draw this or sketch it out really quick. So I'm going to start by just walking through some of the supplies I use, and really this is aimed at more of a mostly beginner. And so because of that, I'm using some pretty basic supplies that you can find at your local craft store. And I'll talk through the colors, what I'm using, and where exactly I got it. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing you're going to need is watercolor paper. I got this pad from my local Hobby Lobby, and it's Master's Touch brand, and it's a cold press surface. So I prefer the cold press paper just because it provides a little bit more grit, and I like my watercolors to have a little bit more texture, and I just like the way the paint moves on it. So I'm going to be using cold press today. This pad was about $16.99, but I got it on sale for half off at Hobby Lobby, so not too bad. One thing I really love about watercolors is that they are not too much of an investment, and then they go a really long way, so you have the paint can last for a long time. So I would suggest cold press surface. You don't need quite this big of a pad. In fact, I tore it in half, so I'm just using half of that paper today. But if you would like to use this big, you can do that. Some people like to work larger, some smaller. I prefer a little bit in between. I don't like working really small because the details can feel harder to get clean, crisp lines with, but I also don't like to work too large. So find what works for you and do that. Okay, so next let me pull this over here actually. I purchased this set from Hobby Lobby as well, and it's kind of the full color set through Master's Touch. And I did that because people who are just starting out and feel a little bit overwhelmed with color theory, this might help you a little bit. Once you get more advanced, you might understand how to mix a lot of these colors, but it's not a bad idea when you're just starting out to have some different color options that don't require too much mixing. And we will talk about mixing today, but this might make it a little bit easier. So I went ahead and bought this package from Hobby Lobby. However, we're mainly going to be using these colors. So I got Zinc Titanium White, Burnt Umber, Phthalo Blue, Ivory Black, Yellow Ochre, and Ripe Sienna. So those are the main colors I'm going to be using today. And then the brushes I'm using, really all you need for today's lesson or tutorial is a round brush like this one. Typically, if you go to the store, it will say on the packaging if it's a watercolor brush or what type of paint it's supposed to be used with. So this one is a watercolor brush, and it is a round brush. So I'm using one round brush, and I would say it's kind of like a medium round brush. It's not crazy big, but it's about that size. And then I just got a fine point brush. It's just good for details. So this little guy right here. So those will be the two brushes I'm mainly using today. Aside from that, all you need is a scrap piece of paper. You do not need to buy this, but I really like having this because it helps me just be able to pull out smaller pieces of watercolor paper and test my colors on it as I'm going. So I kind of enjoy having this. Totally not necessary, but it is helpful. So I'm using that just to test my colors. And then a pencil, and that's really all you need to get started today. So I'm going to go ahead, pull my piece over here. Please also make sure you have water of some sort, and I like to have paper towel on hand in case I spill some of the watercolor or need to pick up a mess really quick or lighten something up. It's just good to have that. So go ahead and grab water, your paintbrushes, paints, paper, pencil, all those good things. If at any point you need to pause the video, you are welcome to do so. I'll try not to move too quickly, but I also don't want to make this video a couple hours long, so hopefully we can find that happy medium, but just know that you are always welcome to go ahead and pause the video. Okay, as I said, this is what we're going to be making today. When I'm drawing, I really like to break up whatever object I'm studying or drawing into its basic shapes. So when I look at this, I automatically see a circle here, an ellipse here, another ellipse down here, another oval right here, and then kind of two half circles over here. So when you're drawing, it really helps to just break it down to its really basic shapes that you can find within the object you're wanting to make. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I will try to help you the best I can, walk you through exactly what I'm doing here. So okay, I'm going to start about this far up my paper, and I'm just going to create a circle. And how I do this is I allow my hand to go in a circular motion, and I don't start drawing right away, but once it's going like that for a while, then I lower my pencil and I just lightly allow it to form a circle. It's a messy circle, not claiming that it is the best circle, but it's a circle. And then I go around and just clean up sort of the outer lines. As I said, messy circle. But the general idea is it's giving me a starting point. So go ahead and draw your circle. And then I'm going to come up to about here and draw an ellipse. So about this high up. Think of it like a squished oval, a kind of flat oval. I'm going to draw that ellipse right here. And again, I'm just doing it really loosey-goosey, trying to make sure I'm not pressing too hard. I'm keeping it nice and loose. So as you can see, it's taking up the middle of my paper, and it's not taking up too much room. It's kind of just centered in the middle there. And then I'm going to go a little bit below, right about here, and do another ellipse. This one's a little bit smaller than the one I did up top. But there you go. So you should have ellipse, circle towards the bottom, and then an ellipse for the very bottom. At this point, I find it easier if I just flip the paper over. And instead of trying to perfectly align my edges facing the other way, it just seems easier if I flip it over and think of it like a bell. So I'm going to start at the top, come around like this. Think of it like a bell shape. So it goes in a little and out. Again, just going really lightly. And on this side, same thing. Out, in, and back out as I get up here. And if I feel like that's pretty uniform on both sides, they kind of mirror each other, then I'm happy with that. It doesn't have to be perfect, but some sort of mirrored image like that. Then I'm going to flip my paper back over, and actually I want to flatten this out just a little bit on this side. I tend to be a little bit pickier probably than I should be at this stage, but I just want to make sure I'm getting a good form that before I start laying down my watercolors. and I'm fairly happy with that. Okay, at this point I'm going to draw a straight line right here just to make sure I'm keeping my next part of my glass moving in the right direction. And then I'm going to draw a ball right about here. Think of it being kind of where the edges of this part of the glass need to come up to and meet. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Just kind of slope upward towards that part of the glass. Okay. And then at this point, I'm going to do two more ellipses. So I'm going to do one here, one here. Don't overthink it, just a quick little sketch. Two ellipses there. And then I'm going to connect them all. So this is going to go up and kind of form a half circle up to the end of the glass. Just like this. Again, just evaluate. A really important step in this period of the drawing is just to step back and make sure all your proportions are looking accurate. So it's not like your bottom is really, really big and your top is tiny. Just make sure overall it looks uniform, that the sizes are where you want them to be and kind of measuring up. I feel like my ellipse should come up just a bit over here. But again, I'm trying not to be too picky. You want to be picky enough to where it's holding good form at this stage, but try not to overthink it too. It's okay. So as long as your glass is looking uniform, you know, it's not looking like the proportions are too off anywhere, then you are probably good. I'm also going to add another ring down at the bottom of this part of the glass. So I'm just kind of coming along here from the edge of the ellipse, coming out just to add that base. Okay. At this point, I'm going to come over and do the handle. So I like to just nestle kind of where it dips in here, just nestle in there a little oval. He just wants to hang out in this little corner. And then I'm going to create my handle from that. The bottom is going to dip down a bit like this, come out here. Again, up here, it's going to dip down just a little bit, come this way, and form a handle over here. All right, we are going to go to the top and just do a really quick sketch of what we want our whipped cream to look like. So I'm going to go ahead and sketch that into here. And I'm thinking I want the main swirl to be right up front. So probably like this. And then the other swirls to kind of work their way around that guy. So there might be a swirl here. A little bit of a swirl coming this way. And then maybe another dip this way. And then generally end about there. And now I'm just going to add some little areas where the whipped cream might be a little bit darker. So I'm just coming in here. Don't overthink this step. It is really just kind of a fun step where you just get to add some swirlies. And you can pause the video. Certainly, if you feel like you want to make your swirls similar to mine, you can pause it and try to replicate that the best you can. But do not overthink it. It shouldn't be where you're spending the majority of your time. It's really just some fun little swirls. I'm pretty happy with this overall. I'm going to go ahead and come down here and just create these little rims down here, and they're going to echo this line, so you want it to be curved. That just helps make the glass handle continue to look round. So I'm going to add that, make them come out just a little bit, and curve or round these edges. Same down here, just repeating. Okay, so I'll hold that up close so you can kind of see how it's rounded or curved. All right, and then I'm going to create another round right where this circle is. Just create this little round area to make, again, help this area look round and circle. And then I'm going to do sort of teardrop shapes up here. 1, 2. And that all is just going to help with keeping this glass looking like it is supposed to be. All right. At the very top here, I'm going to come around and add where the whipped cream ends and where the hot chocolate's going to begin. So I'm just echoing or repeating this similar line up here, right there. Not quite happy with how this end turned out. Okay. All right. So at this point, I'm going to take my eraser and go ahead and erase whatever lines I do not need. So let's start with the main obvious ones. So let's erase the circle in the middle. We really don't need that guy. Brush that away. Okay. Then this line down the middle here, I'm going to erase the top portion till it hits the rim of this first one, then erase in between those two rims, and erase below it. And this is where you can also erase that little circle we made. That was just to help us keep a curved line for that area. If you really want to be picky, you are welcome to go ahead and erase these little lines inside the curved area here, and I'm going to do that just to clean it up a little bit more. Okay, and then I'm going to erase some of the messy lines down here, keeping the general lip of the bottom of the cup there, but I just want to clean it up a little bit because it's kind of messier than I want it to be. Here we go. And then I'm going to come up to where the whipped cream is and just erase the lines I don't need there. So that would be this one. Any of the top of the ellipse of the cup, that's what I'm wanting to erase. So really, when you're done, this is about what it should look like. Okay, at this point, we are ready to begin mixing colors. So go ahead, I'm just going to set this aside for a second and pull over my palette, my mixing palette, and my colors, and let's talk through this a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and grab my burnt umber, put a dab of that in here. About that much. And I want my hot chocolate to have a little bit of red in it, so I'm also going to add this raw sienna and also just a dab of that. However, I'm going to dab this in the section next to the brown, the burnt umber, And that will allow me to grab some of it and pull it over here to mix it, not mix it together. So I'm just going to put it right about here and pull it over. I'm going to start with my big brush, so my big round brush, this one here, and pull my water up. I'm going to go ahead and start with that. I'm going to add a lot of water to my brown, my burnt umber. Then I'm going to wash my brush out just because I like to have a clean brush when I grab the next amount of pigment. Grab a little bit of this guy, pull it over here. I just think the red really adds to the hot cocoa and gives it a little bit more richness and depth. This is totally optional. If you feel more comfortable just grabbing the straight brown burnt umber, that is great as well. Okay, at this point, this is when I grab my little tablet here and I rip out a piece, because this really helps me see how my paints are looking, how much water I've added to it, if I'm happy with it, what my hot cocoa is going to look like. And I am pretty happy with that. It has just a little bit of orange, but still resembles brown more than orange. So I'm going to start with that. But before I go ahead and start adding this to my palette, I'm actually going to grab a little bit of this color, bring it over to my next little section over here, and I'm going to add a little bit of very, very little bit of ivory black to darken it up some. And again, I'm just going to dab it in the section next to it so I'm not blending the colors when I don't want to. And I'm just going to barely pick some of that up and add it over here. And that will allow me to get my darker colors. Again, I'm going to test it on here really quickly. I think I want to go a little bit darker than that. So I'm just adding a little more black. And I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to go ahead and wash my brush. Push this over. Pull my drawing forward. Make some room for myself. Okay, now this is where I like to add a lot of water to my base color, so I just dip my brush in the water a couple times and bring that water over here until I'm happy with the consistency where it's at. Again, if it helps you, use this paper to test it out first, but I want it to be about that consistency as I'm adding it over here. And then I'm just going to bring it over. I'm going to be working a little quickly because I also want to add some darker values. So I'm going to be moving pretty fast. Once I start, I'm going to lay it down and just keep going. And you're just filling in this whole area with this color. I really like to think of artwork sort of like a puzzle. When I used to teach art, high school art, I would tell them that all the time. It's just a big puzzle. You're trying to figure out what the next right piece is, what you think makes the most sense to create the bigger picture. I know that's simplified, but it rings true for the most part. Okay. So now that I have that down, I'm going to wet my brush a little bit and go ahead, grab that darker value and go around the edges, adding some darker colors here. Just really want my hot chocolate to pop, so I'm adding in those deep values around the edges. This also helps create the form of your glass, gives it some definition. Great time for that. You can come back and add, once it's all dry, you can add darker values. However, if you do that, it's going to be very, very defined and not blend together. So now is really a good time to create, I'm just making my upper color, since I'm done with it, darker so I can add more darks. But now is really the time to create those dark values and just add a little bit of definition where you're wanting it. And right now I want it to be around my glass for the most part. Sort of like an outline. Really just adding that beautiful, deep coloring. I'm going to grab a little water, add that to my brush, and just make sure these are really getting in there, off my brush and onto the paper. And I'm pretty happy with how that's coming together. Might even do a little bit up here. Not too much. Just a little. Picking up more of the color over here and adding that down here. Again, just observing a lot. Am I happy with the direction it's going? Am I happy with how that's looking? What's the next right puzzle piece for me? And you know what I think that might be is taking the water and blending this area. So I basically washed my brush out and I'm just blending this area a little bit more. A little more here. There we go. Because I don't want it ending up choppy. I want it to be pretty even with different values. I don't want it to be drying too choppy. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to leave that as is. Although I'm going to fix this little corner. There we go. Okay, so next I'm going to mix my jar colors, which is where my phthalo blue comes in. So I'm going to grab that phthalo blue, put a dab of it over here. And this might be a little bit foreign to you guys, but I'm actually going to grab a little bit of this sienna. So if we were to talk color theory a little bit, the opposite of the color wheel from blue is orange. So when I want to, actually I'm going to dab it over here. When I want to deepen my blue, or instead of adding black right away, I like to use the opposite color of the color wheel. And that just really helps this deepen without turning straight black, if that makes sense. So, yep, I like this right here. And so I'm going to do that, but I want a greater amount of that. So I'm going to go ahead and grab more of my phthalo blue, mix that over here, wash my brush quick, and then grab some more of that sienna and pull it over here and mix that in until I'm really happy with where it's at. I'm wanting, and this also might be a little bit of a foreign concept, but really a lot of, and I may have went too far there, we'll see, but a lot of reflections on glass are not quite gray, they're more of a blue-gray. And so that's what I'm looking for, is this blue-gray. I may have went too far, we will see once I get it on my paper, my testing paper. I'm adding water just to tone it, or to water it down a little bit. But I want more of that blue gray. So let's see how this comes out once it's on my paper. I'm going to water it down even more and see just exactly what that's looking like. You know what? I am happy with that. It has just a hint of blue. So I'm going to take that and water it down quite a bit because my first layer is my lightest layer. I'm wanting to just lay down a little bit of definition in my glass. So I don't want it to be too dark. Just about like, and again, I'm going to test it before I put it on my main paper. And that's really still too dark, so I'm going to grab more water. Maybe even mix it over here till I get it just to the right amount I am wanting. There we go. So I want it pretty transparent before I add it over here. So now that I did that and I got it watered down enough, I'm going to pull it over to here and add a little bit of shadowing. I'm going to mimic my or echo my line here down here. So I'm just going to create sort of a circle, and I'm only going to come about 3/4 of the way towards this side of the glass and then come down. I want to leave some white area, and you know what? I want that even more watered down, so I'm washing my brush again and then pulling the color I already have and bringing that down. I'm just going to fill it all the way to the rim. And then, though the shadow here stops at the top of the rim, I'm going to pull the rim part all the way with this lighter color. About like that. Good. And then I'm going to take that same color and go up to my handle and add some of that color and definition up here. Now you want to be careful if this part is not dry, it may run into each other, so try to make sure it's just dry enough so it's not going to run or bleed, but then go ahead and add this. At this point, I like to keep the very center line white. So go ahead and leave this part white, kind of creating an outline with this shadow. If I can call it an outline. I think that's probably the best way to describe that. But truly just keeping that center as white as possible. Very good. And again, grabbing that same color. Oh, no, actually, I'm going to mix the color for my whipped cream and color that in first, and then come with my colored glass up here. So I'm going to wash my brush. Come over to my color palette again. This one's a little bit trickier, but really I'm going to take that color I used for the hot cocoa. If there's any of it left, you may need to mix a new amount. I think I'll be okay, but I just barely have enough. And I'm actually going to add a little bit of white to it. Traditionally, really white isn't supposed to be used that much in watercolors, but I'm cheating a little bit today because I want more of a cream color, and so I'm going to go ahead and just add a little bit of white onto this color to get more of that cream that I'm looking for. Pick up a little bit of water, bring it over, and then I want to test it out. And why it's important to test is I think my water might be too muddy at this point. It may be carrying too many pigments, but we'll see. But no, I think yeah, I think it picked up some of the blue from the water. So I'm going to stop the video quick, go get some fresh water, and then recreate this cream color for my whipped cream. So in case you need more of that color anyway, I'll just remix it with you. So I'm starting with the burnt umber, doing a little dab of that up here, adding a little bit of the raw sienna. I still have some of that left over here, so I'm just grabbing from over here, adding that here. That was way too much, so a little bit more burnt umber. I would say take your time with color mixing. To me, color is one of the most important elements of art. That's my personal feeling. That's not written anywhere, that's just how I feel. I feel like if you get your colors down well, they're where you want them to be, it can transform your piece quite a bit. Okay, I think I'm pretty happy with that. Again, I'm going to grab it and just make sure it's close to this one here. And it's more transparent than that one, but it's close in color, so I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to pull some of it down here. And then I'm going to add some of that white because I just want this nice cream color. All right, let's see how that looks. Again, testing it out on my little sheet over here, my cheat sheet. That looks quite different now that I cleaned out my brush and remixed it. I'm trying to decide if I like it. I think it's a little too dark still, so I'm going to pull it over to a clean part of my palette, add some water over here, grab a little scoop of that because I think I'm just getting too much pigment and I need it pretty watered down. And then we're going to try that again. And that you can just barely see, and that's pretty much how I want it, just barely adding a little bit of depth and dimension. It should be pretty light, pretty close to white itself, and so I'm happy with that. So I'm going to grab that, and this part I work quickly as well to just add in color in. Think of it like a coloring book, but add in that color up here. Quickly, quickly. Just fill that space in. Something I forgot to mention to you guys as well. This is not a necessary, like a need, but if you wanted to before you started painting, you are always welcome to erase your lines if you feel like they're a little too dark. So I really could have went in and erased these and made it so I could just barely see them. Sometimes that helps so that your pencil marks don't come through the watercolor quite as much. Really depends on the object you're painting and what you prefer. But okay, so now that I got that in, I'm going to wash my brush out. And here is where I'm going to step back and observe for a second. Okay, while this is drying, I'm going to go ahead and grab my glass color again. So this is the bluish color that we used for this area down here. I'm just going to test it out over here. Yep, that's still how I like it to be. I'm going to darken it a little bit by grabbing where I mixed the color right here and adding to it over here because I just want it to be a little bit darker when I come with my second round of details here. So there we go. I'm pretty happy with that. And you know what? I'm going to switch over to my smaller detail brush because I think at this point that will serve me best. Okay, so I'm picking up some of that pigment and bringing it over here. So I'm going to start adding some more details to the glass. Here I would like to define the rim a little bit more, so I'm going to pull this guy and just draw the outline that I'm wanting. Now, if that's too dark for you, which honestly, I'm feeling that's a little dark, I probably should have watered it down a tad bit more, so I'm going to pick up a little bit of that pigment and try again. So I'm going to come back to my palette, add some more water to this. Just want it a little more watered down, not quite that dark. Okay. And then I'm going to redo that little area. And I'm going to do the same and start defining the bottom here. Come around the corner here. And this top lip of the ring on the bottom. Just adding a little bit more definition. And then for this side, I'm actually going to color this in because it would carry a little bit more shadow on this side. There we go. And then I'm going to come up here and fill in these two little teardrops that we drew. Fill those guys in. And I'm starting to get a little thin, so I'm going to pick up more pigment over here. And again, I'm just going to take this and define certain areas. I want to define this area a little bit more. I apologize for how dark it is getting. I'm sitting right by the window, and it is a winter, snowy, wintry evening. It is definitely reflected on my lack of light at the moment. And picking this up again, I'm going to do this next little ring. Same idea. Heavier on the shadows on this side than on this side. So I'm just adding this, define the top. Come around here. Repeat the same thing up here. Defining the top. And then I'm going to connect these two with a little bit of that darker shadow and really bring it down here too. Then I'm just going to bring it down even a little bit more. A lot of this is really just adding it, stepping back and looking, seeing what the right next move is. All right, so I'm keeping my shadows heavier on this end. And I'm gonna add some up here as well. And then right in the middle, I kind of want white space in between my mug and this line, just so it allows some of that light to reflect the glass how I would like it to. Good. I'm going to pick up more pigment. Define this side just a little bit. This is more of a true outline and not filling in areas. I just want it to add some definition, but I don't want to add shadow, if that makes sense. Then I'm going to bring it up here, do the same thing. So my shadows are going to be darkest right next to the mug here. You're going to be surprised too. If you haven't worked with watercolors before, you'll probably be surprised with how light these shadows end up drying. They look pretty stark right now, but they will probably dry pretty light and not be as dramatic, because once those watercolors dry, they just tend to dry a little bit lighter. So keep that in mind as you go too. All right, so I'm going to bring this color as well, just really highlighting the edges again, just to add dimension around the edges. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Maybe add some up here. Okay. This part is kind of fun because you get to come up here, and this is really where the painting starts to pop in my mind, because you see some definition up here. So I'm going to go up here, and for me it's easier if I flip it this way. You don't have to, I just like to. And then I'm going to make this ellipse with that same color I used here, down there. I'm just going to grab this ellipse here, the top of it, and create a thicker ring around the top. I want to leave a little bit of a white space in between here and here, just so that it is allowing, again, light to also form and define this glass a little bit. You don't want to forget about the power of light in forming an object. It's important, and trying to keep that a little bit intact is important. I feel like that might be a little bit dark in the middle, so I'm just going to dab a centerpiece here, pick up some of that pigment, make sure it's not too dark where I don't want it to be too dark. And then using that same color, just drawing along the edges here, bringing those glass edges down. At this point, I am going to add I'm going to grab more of the color we've been using, pull it over here, and add just a bit of black. Not a lot. Remember, it's better to go a little at a time, add a little at a time till you get it to the pigment you need it to be, to the shade and you want it to be. So I'm just wanting a little bit darker shadow, and to me that's a good amount of darkness. Once you've mixed that, I am going to go ahead, and this is where I do really subtle touch-ups, but it adds a lot because it's so stark, such high contrast. Just do this really dark color, come in. I'm washing out my brush because I picked up too much of that paint and it is a little heavy. So I'm washing that out and just going to pull that color. There we go. Just along that edge, just a hair. Along the bottom here, just a hair. Again, just creating that extra amount of depth. Doing this bottom ring, or rim, I guess is the word. The top rim. Just creating that extra oomph, that little bit of kick that we need. Adding a little bit to here. Again, my darkest shadows being on this side. Not a problem if you want to do a little definition on this side, but really your darker side is definitely on this side here. Okay. And just keep in mind, it does tend to dry a little bit later. It's hard to find that balance, and that comes with practice, knowing how dark to go and where. But just keep working at it, you will get it. truly believe practice is really important with art. The more you do it, the better you're going to get. So again, I'm coming up here and doing one more layer of these dark values just around these edges, just to add that last bit of pop. I don't know if you guys remember in like kindergarten when you had tissue paper projects that you would do, where you cut up all the different colors of tissue paper and glued them on to create a picture. I like to think of watercolors kind of like that, because really it's lots of layers of colors working together. You know, when you would lay a piece of that square tissue paper down, you glue it on top of another, you see the color underneath it, and it creates this beautiful layered piece. And I truly think watercolors are a lot like that. Then I'm going to come up here and again just adding that deeper value right here, right on the edge of this, because that's going to pick up the shadows. Your glass is thicker there, it tends to pick up a little bit more shadow, and the same with the other end. Just creating the illusion of a thick glass rim. And I might drag this out just a little bit along the bottom of that rim. Just really lightly, a little on the top. Yep, and then the same on this end. Just the top. I'm going to pull it over, just extend it a little bit. Okay. I am pretty happy with that. At this point, I'm going to wash out my brush and add some darker colors of that cream color where I want the whipped cream swirls to show. So I am grabbing that color I already mixed over here. Just want to double check it on here, make sure it makes sense. And that's pretty light. So I'm going to grab this, add a bit of it over here. That's probably too dark, but we will see. Kind of a caramel color. You know what? I think it's just too watered down, so I'm going to grab more of that. Grab some white. Just make more of that color because I think it's needing more pigment. It's just lacking in the pigment. Okay. I think that's good. I just want it more watered down again. And actually, I'm going to add a little bit more white to that. Little dab. Little dab will do ya, as they say. All right, so here we go. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that color. So again, needs to be watered down much more, but I think that is the direction I would like to go. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pick up that color. Again, it was just the whipped cream color, which was brown, a little bit of the burnt umber sienna, a lot more burnt umber than sienna, so just a little bit of sienna, and then I added white and watered it down. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just in all these little areas emphasize my swirls just because I really like my whipped cream to be swirly. Just add some of that definition here. A little here, a little bit here, and there. Yeah, and I like this to be pretty controlled. I don't want this to be wet or spreading. That's why we waited till this whipped cream area was dry, so that when I add it on, it's holding that shape pretty well and creating the definition of swirls. I just want that to be more controlled. Again, your swirls do not have to look the same as mine, but just adding some definition there is great. Okay, at this point, I'm going to grab my brown up here and add quite a bit of black to it because I want to make those dark chocolate chunks at the top, and I want them to be nice and deep and rich in color. So here they are. You were already painting on top of a dried area here, and we didn't really layer on a ton, so it should be pretty dry. But if you want to wait a few minutes to make sure that dries entirely, that is also fine. But I'm going to go ahead and just start adding some chocolate chips. I don't want these to be perfectly square. I kind of like a more organic shape for these. And as far as placement goes, I'm not really thinking through it much. Just adding wherever I happen to think chocolate chips would be delicious, which is everywhere, really. I'm a chocolate lover, so I'm not holding back on the chocolate chips. All right. At this point, you can step back and enjoy your cup of hot chocolate that you made. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope it was helpful. I would love to hear your comments and feedback, as this is my first ever watercolor tutorial, and I want to know how it went for you, if it was easy enough to follow, what things I could help you with more as I do future videos. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks so much for painting with me, and I look forward to doing more videos with you.